Thanks very much. I was just saying to Marion, I've never been at a presentation where there's been a red box come up to tell you it's over, right? So technology's good. Hopefully I don't get any red boxes. Thanks everyone for sticking with us here. What I hope to do today is work this machine. Marion gave a really good overview of some of the instruments within the Conservation and Stewardship Strategy of the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, part of Land Use Framework. So what I'm going to talk about today is a partnership of organizations that are looking to try and test the development of one of those tools known as transfer of development credits. So I'm not going into a whole bunch of detail on what they are. If you want, to understand more about what a transfer of development credit is, it's all spelled out in either the Conservation and Stewardship Strategy or if you're interested in the regulation. But essentially, it's a tool that's available to municipalities to help move development away from areas that they're interested in conserving to areas that they've designated as growth areas. And it allows this development to happen at the same time as conservation. So essentially you're taking impact from one part of a landscape or a municipality and moving it over to another. Traditionally, municipalities have used zoning to achieve this goal. The TDCs help to support zoning, right? Landowners are part, and Jillian talked about ecosystem services and this notion of transfer of wealth. TDCs help to transfer wealth from development areas to conservation areas, and hence wealth is provided to landowners for compensation of conservation. And this benefit then helps grow either development in one area or conservation in another. That's my quick, and then the last slide is that it's a voluntary program. I should mention it hasn't been done in, there's no program in Alberta or in Canada. There's lots of examples out of the US where they're called transfer or tradable development rights. But in Canada and in Alberta, there is no single program. And that's the essence of what we're trying to understand here. The area that we're working in, where this TDC pilot is known as the Beaver Hills Initiative Area, which those of you who are not familiar is located just east of Edmonton, includes Elk Island National Park, all the way down through Miquelon Park, and it's made up of municipalities, 5 municipalities, federal and provincial parks getting together. And really this landscape is a bit of an anomaly. It's really a knob and kettle, lots of wetlands, lots of natural land, native parkland, natural grasslands in the area. It's generally cooler, and it sits perched essentially east of the city. In about 2002, these municipalities came together and said, what can we do to protect or to work cooperatively around land use planning? And that was the genesis of this Beaver Hills initiative. So what we're doing is working with this partnership to try and advance TDCs. If you want more information on the Beaver Hills initiative, you can go to their website, and it talks about all the projects that they're working on, TDCs being one of them. So the goal of a TDC program within the Beaver Hills initiative was to test and develop a program for implementation around conservation. And really, I think, it's more of a personal, and Marion can offer her opinion, but I think this is about building capacity and leadership so that similar programs could be built in other jurisdictions of the province. The key collaborators on this are Brenda Wispinski. She's with Strathcona County, and she serves as the executive director of the Beaver Hills Initiative. You've met Marion and one of her colleagues, Marius, from Alberta Innovates. Kim Good, many of you know Kim with Mistakis Institute. Candice Vannon, who works with Agriculture Canada, as well as Paul Rodchenko with Alberta Parks, and myself with Land Stewardship Centre. Objectively, what are we trying to achieve here? Well, we're trying to test this market approach to provide incentives for rural landowners We're trying to create some new opportunities around agriculture and rural tourism. So if you protect or conserve an area, you may enhance tourism and some of the benefits that Jillian spoke to earlier from an ecosystem service perspective. Try and provide some leadership and develop capacity around how does a TDC program work? What are some of the areas that you need to consider when developing a program? What are the information sources? What are the political risks associated with it? How do you work both from a municipal and a provincial level and dovetailing those together? Our pilot project is scheduled to wrap up at the end of this calendar year. I should mention that prior to 2009, Marion worked on a feasibility study for TDCs in a municipal context, and that helped to provide some of the information that we used when we worked on the conservation and stewardship strategy as part of land use framework. So this slide and the following slide are the key components of this current pilot project. Okay, so we want to kind of understand from a developer perspective what does a TDC program look like. How about from a public perception? This is general public. What do you feel about rural development? What do you feel about urban development? Trying to understand economically, what would the costs be of these credits if they were traded? So some economic analysis. As a result of this economic analysis, doing some focus group testing with public as well as individuals connected from a choice perspective. Understanding what does a TDC program look like administratively, and then finally some landowner consultation in terms of if you are a landowner who are eligible to either sell or receive credits, what's your perceptions on that? So what I hope to do here is just go through a little bit about each of those 6 key points and give you a flavor of what we've done or what we're intending to do over the balance of this pilot project. So relative to developers, there were some initial focus group sessions and meetings with developers that we held last year, where we asked them a series of questions, and we wanted to understand, okay, what would your interest be? If you're a developer, would you be interested in becoming part of a TDC program? And this is some of the feedback that we received from those meetings is, you know, the current process is really time consuming. So if you're going to add another piece to it, how can you streamline that process? The capital region planning that's gone on has identified some growth nodes, but the developers are feeling that those are really high, right? And that the market doesn't bear the targets that the capital region plan has laid out. They're feeling that municipal reserve percentages are high. And so how would, if we're going to add more conservation land, how would that affect MR or environmental reserves? And could you use the transfer development credit process as an opportunity to help with the wetland mitigation process? And Jillian spoke about some of the work that's being done in southern Alberta links directly to mitigation. We did some public, and Marion and her colleagues did some public perception focus group and wanting to understand from a general public perspective, what do you feel about rural development within this pilot area of central Alberta? So what were the most important rural amenities? What were some of the benefits of living in rural Alberta? What do you think about rural diversification? What do you think, what are some of your concerns relative? So we're trying to get this picture of what the public feels currently about rural Alberta within Strathcona, Beaver counties, Leduc counties east of the city. What do you think about urban development? How do you think that the current pace and state of development and planning from an urban context? Are you pleased with that? Do you have some concerns about that? And so these focus group attendees provided us that feedback, and it helped us to paint that picture as we're moving forward on a TDC approach. Marius with Alberta Innovates has just recently completed some economic analysis, because one of the things around TDCs is there has to be some value associated with that credit. So he developed a series, he and his colleagues developed a series of scenarios specific to Strathcona County, looking at the current market of and sales of property sales within the region, to try and understand and estimate what would a TDC, what would a light on the hand work good? How could you estimate supply and demand of a market from an economic perspective? How could you estimate the value of what those credits might look like? And looking at that over 3 scenarios, as I mentioned, but over about a 30 or 25-year planning horizon. So here are the 3 scenarios. Business as usual. Those of you familiar with municipal planning and land use bylaws, in Strathcona County, in the pilot area, the current bylaw allows for this number of new residences. So if you have no TDC program, all you can do to meet the additional 2,700 is just relax your bylaws. So you don't have to have any new program. You could just say, we're going to allow you to develop greater than what our original bylaw stated. If you want to have some sort of a TDC program, and if your sending area is, in Strathcona context, the Beaverhill Moraine Planning Region, which is the area south of Elk Island Park, essentially, and the receiving area is Country Residential Zone, which is just north and west of that, well, you could relax your bylaw, allow an increase of number of lots per quarter section, and that value then, and the analysis is showing that you would be essentially valuing $26,000 per hectare, or if you said that was one credit, that gives us an idea of what a credit would cost, right? $26,000. By doing that, you could conserve approximately 2,300 hectares because you reduced any kind of development in that Beaver Hills and shifted it over into the country residential. The third scenario, similar, same number targets, but you're moving it from the country residential area to agricultural land. Costs are higher based on land values, and you've conserved less acres. So this starts to paint the picture of, well, what could this system look like?
3 minutes, right?
Yeah. One of Marion's colleagues is now going to take those scenarios and do some public choice experiments to understand, okay, from a focus group, which of those 3 would you prefer? Do you like business as usual, or should we be looking at some sort of cost per hectare? What this does then is it gives us an idea of what are people willing to pay if you're looking at developing new subdivisions or transferring costs for enhanced higher density. Some of the work that we're doing now is we're going to go out and we're talking to landowners who are in these potential sending areas and asking them a series of questions around policy scenarios, around the tool, and what their perceptions are of having a TDC program. So we're in the process of holding a series of landowner focus groups, asking a series of questions. What do you value? If you were a landowner who could sell a credit, what would that credit be worth to you? What kind of restrictions should be placed on that credit? What kind of agreement should be used as an administrative element for that credit? And the final piece, work being done by Mistakis Institute, is to develop the administrative model for a TDC program. Remember, we don't have one currently. So 2 main pieces, the setup of the program, understanding where those conservation and development areas are, what does the system look like, how do you track a system, how do you educate stakeholders who are engaged in that system, and then the second piece is managing it. So now you have a system in place. How do you certify conservation areas? How do you match buyers and sellers? How do you track it? Is there a role for a bank in this? Does a landowner sell a credit to a bank who then sells it to a developer? What's the thought process on all that? If you want more information, I'm happy to shift it to Marion or to Brenda. who are leading the program. A number of the documents that speak to TDCs are either on the Land Use Framework site or on the Beaver Hills site specific to this project.